Hi, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. My name is Patty Nishiyama, and I am part of the marketing team here at Workday. Welcome. And I want to give a quick moment to thank you before we start for joining on this Monday morning. I know times are crazy. We're almost at the holiday season, so we really appreciate you joining us for our webinar today. So this is part of our Looking Forward with Workday webinar series, which gives you insights into how your organization can do more with Workday. Today, we're going to be talking about the expanded role of FP&A. So going from financial planning, bringing you to company-wide planning. Just a few housekeeping items before we begin. I'm not going to go through each and every one of these. I just want to hit on a couple important ones. If you have any technical issues or anything like that, feel free to hit the help widget or the Q&A. You can find some answers there, and there is somebody kind of in the background that can answer any technical questions or help you out there. You can also ask questions on the content that you see itself. We'll also be monitoring that and try to answer all of your questions as they come in. And finally, at the end, there is a survey. We would love it if you could take a minute to fill that out and let us know how we are doing. And of course, this presentation can contain some forward-looking statements and discussion of future or planned functionality, but it is important that you make your purchase decisions based on what is currently available, as what we talk about today is subject to. So with that, let's get started with today's session. As I introduced myself before, I am Patty, part of the Solutions Marketing team here at Workday, and I would like for Matt and Cody to introduce themselves. So over to you, Matt.
Hello, everyone. My name is Matt Shore, and I look after product strategy for Workday's planning business.
And hey, everyone.
Cody?
So my name is Cody Johnson. I'm a senior solution architect here at Workday. I work with a lot of customers, both customers and prospects around planning needs. Been around the product for a long time, and I'll be taking you through the demonstration today.
Great, thank you. So just a quick agenda of what we're going to be covering today. We're going to get into company-wide planning itself, what it means, and how it will be useful to your organization. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into some company-wide planning use cases so you can better understand how you can use planning across your organization. Matt's going to take you through some solution requirements. Then we're going to get into a demo, talk about a couple more examples, and then we will end it off with some Q&A. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Matt.
Okay, great. Thanks, Patty. So why company-wide planning? Well, I'm sure you guys are living through a lot of this today. Organizations continue to adjust to this new normal that we're all living. And as part of this, planning is becoming really a mission-critical function. And this has to do with aligning supply and demand all the way through to managing a distributed and remote workforce, managing cash and all the risk associated with that, all amid increased economic uncertainty, volatility, and so on. This is really where companies are finding that finance has to bring all of the functions into the planning fold. In fact, according to Gartner, by 2024, some 70% of you will be leveraging your investment in planning outside of typical use cases in FP&A. And Gartner refers to this as xP&A for extended planning and analysis. So let's take a closer look at how this works. Now, finance orchestrates enterprise planning. And at Workday, we've always believed that the promise of enterprise planning is realized when finance and operations are deeply linked. Now, for operations, where plans generally refresh more frequently and based on a higher volume of detailed data, this means understanding the financial impact of all decisions, which lowers execution risk. For example, if you think about sales operations in an high-tech company like Workday, just imagine how much faster a sales ops director can go if she's able to see in real time the cost implications of a revised hiring plan across her sales team, as opposed to slinging spreadsheets around through email and all the rest of it. Now, at the same time, for the CFO, this is where you get increased confidence in business projections, thanks to links back to operational detail that those financial plans depend on. And of course, people are the key ingredient for success. And so workforce planning is absolutely foundational. So whether you're doing staffing planning to support a budgeting process, org modeling and design to ensure alignment with strategic initiatives, or planning out the kinds of skills and talent you'll need for your next phase of growth, this is where workforce planning is absolutely a vital component for company-wide planning. Now, the thing about company-wide planning is that you really have to consider it through an industry lens. Certainly the way a software company thinks about planning out sales, like in the example that I just mentioned, is different from how, say, a retailer would think about planning sales. And some use cases outside of kind of core financial planning use cases really only make sense in certain industries. For example, grant planning is something that not-for-profits do or higher education organizations do. And physical product planning, where you're looking hard at supply chain kinds of activities, only makes sense for certain kinds of companies. So that's a really important dimension in considering company-wide planning, and that's very much in line with how we as a solution provider think about it also. So to make it a little more concrete, let me hand it back over to Patty to talk to you about some of the use cases that we're seeing for company-wide planning.
Great, thanks, Matt. First, I'd like to start off by saying that we are delighted to have over 5,300 adaptive planning customers to date. So we are really excited about that. And these are customers that are across all industries and span from all sizes, from small and medium-sized businesses all the way to the Fortune 100. And I would really also like to make a quick comment on the Workday and the partner services teams who are able to really quickly pivot and implement 100% remote, during this time, while also preserving the same level and service that our customers are used to. In fact, we had a recent customer satisfaction survey of 97%. So they were really able to pivot quickly without skipping a beat, really. So diving a little bit deeper into company-wide planning, as Matt said, this is really about going throughout the entire organization. And with Workday Adaptive Planning, you get a planning platform that supports the entire company, not just the power users or not just the analysts, but getting everybody in the business to participate is really key to adoption. I'm in the marketing department, so spreadsheets are not my favorite thing in the world, but even given the easy user interface that we have, can easily use Workday Adaptive Planning. There's a lot of familiarity in the interface. There's a lot of drag and drop. So it's really easy for anybody to use, which again is key to ensuring that company-wide adoption. So everybody at every function and at every level can plan for the details that they need for their own business. And then this could be all brought together into a holistic company-wide business plan that is typically orchestrated still by the finance department. So here are some of the use cases that we've really invested in and are really moving forward with. So we've expanded again beyond financial and even workforce planning and gotten into sales planning and marketing planning and operational planning, as Matt detailed earlier. This is really key for how we can plan in any industry. So if you're a healthcare provider and you're managing what the true cost of care is, or you're a media streaming company and you're managing subscription revenue and whatnot, Workday provides you with the flexibility that you need to plan for any industry. And just to give you a little bit insight into how our customers and your peers are actually using this today, here's sort of a snapshot of some of the extended planning use cases that we're seeing. You can see we have a lot of operational planning use cases, a lot of sales planning use cases, and even marketing planning use cases in campaigns and pricing and discounting and so forth. So this hopefully is really giving you a sense of the breadth of the use cases that you and your peers have implemented. And I wanted to touch on one story in particular. This is a really interesting story from a company called Rubrik. They're a global provider of cloud-based data management and protection solutions, and they're really experiencing tremendous growth, up to 1,500 employees in just 4 years. And they are using planning throughout their organization in all corners of their business. So before Workday adopted planning, they started off as a startup using spreadsheets and even Google Sheets. So they had some semblance of collaboration, but as they grew very fast, they realized that the data quality and the data integrity started to get impacted. So they deployed Adaptive not only in their finance department, but with the success that they saw in their finance department, they put it also in other parts of their organization. So they use workforce planning for headcount and expenses. They also had Workday HCM. And they also use demand planning and even sales planning for territory optimization. What was before some ad hoc territory utilization and sales reps sort of cherry picking their accounts, their sales ops team were able to organize their plan down to even the zip code level and had some great heat map style visualization to help them do it. And so they got into demand planning. They also got into demand planning by making the most of and reducing their inventory costs. So they were able to scale right along with their explosive growth and became more collaborative and efficient in the process. So with that, I will turn it back over to Matt to talk about some of the solutions part.
All right, thanks, Patty. So as Patty described, many of you are already taking planning to the next level, which is really great to see and very inspirational for us. So some of the use cases that she highlighted show how you extend planning across your organization out of just the financial core to do workforce, sales, and other kinds of operational use cases. Now, getting this right from an organizational perspective is a big deal. It takes commitment and process and change management. But on the technology side, there's some key requirements that have to be in order. And let me just take a minute to highlight a few of those. The first one is you have to have a very flexible, performant, scalable modeling platform that will support not just core financial use cases, but also workforce planning and different kinds of operational use cases. Kind of obvious, but just wanted to highlight that. The next thing is your planning solution has to be easy for everyone to use, not just the administrator and the power user, but also some of the more casual business users who might be line of business managers or leaders of different operating functions. Without that, you won't have the kind of adoption that's necessary. They really need to stand up a planning environment, much like how our friends in finance have been able to do. That's their own. They manage it and evolve it how they need to do, how they need to in order to run their business. That's a really important ingredient. And lastly, we believe that the solution has to support integrated plan, execute, analyze process. This is really where business agility moves to the next level. And so now these three taken together are just a very important foundation for company-wide planning to be successful. And delivering on these capabilities has been our mission at Workday for the past several years. And in fact, we believe that Workday is uniquely positioned to address these kinds of challenges. So we've come up with an architecture that supports company-wide planning that we call federated planning. And so this is where I touched on this a little bit just a minute ago, but you want to enable and empower each function or business unit to have its own planning environment or planning instance, while preserving the ability to bring all of these pieces together, typically in finance, into kind of a holistic, comprehensive view. And let me just take a minute to walk you through how this might work in practice and how many of our customers roll out these kinds of solutions. So to start, usually start in finance over at corporate, build up a planning environment that's wired up to your GL. And let's just say in this hypothetical example that you guys acquire another company that has its own GL, and that you'll operate this new company as a business unit. So with the federated planning architecture, there's no issue. The business unit would get its own planning environment, and they can start to plan in using the same technology that you're using at corporate, but you can link the two, and now the planning results from your business unit can start to roll up over to the corporate instance. And we'll actually show you how some of that works. Cody will show you in just a minute. Now, to go faster, you roll out planning to HR so that you could do sophisticated workforce planning and design your org and just make the process more seamless from a staffing perspective, which is certainly foreground and relevant for finance. And then the next step you might take is to bring online a planning environment for sales so that they can develop high fidelity bookings plans and do all of the staffing planning that the sales department needs in order to execute against those booking plans. And again, all of these pieces coming together and linked in an efficient, high fidelity way over in your corporate plan. So again, this is an example of a federated planning environment that allows each entity or function to plan the way they need to plan, but they're all interconnected to form this holistic corporate plan. So, of course, the benefit is each individual entity gets to plan much more efficiently, make faster data-driven decisions, and you get this a more robust, big picture of the overall execution of the business. So the nice thing about this architecture is that it's inherently scalable. So as you add more of these components, as you bring more functions or more business units online, they stand up an environment that's their own, but they're all interlinked. Okay? So broad strokes, this is how it can work. Now, to help make this all a little bit more concrete, let me pass it over to Cody, and he will be able to show you some interesting aspects about what an actual solution might look like.
All right. Thanks, Matt and Patty, for the setup. And so to give you a little bit of an idea of what this looks like in the system based on what they were talking about, over the next 15 to 20 minutes, I'm going to take you through a bit of a story. And that story crosses a few different parts of this organization. So we'll spend some time in finance, where we'll log in, we'll see how everything's looking currently, we'll set our targets for the rest of the year, and then we'll pass it over to our friends in sales, who's then going to look at their plan, make adjustments based on what they're seeing, passing it over to HR, who's going to plan positions to meet those sales plans that we've got, ultimately passing it back to finance to then look at how everything comes together, like Matt was saying, and then be able to even plan, be able to even execute on that plan, shipping that data to Workday. Now, as we kind of go through, we're going to be talking about a lot of different functionality. And again, I'm going to do this in about 15 or 20 minutes, so I'm going to go fairly fast throughout. but here I'll share my screen and then we'll get started. All right. Should be coming up for you. And as you'll see, I'm logged into Workday. Now, the nice thing here is, based on my security, based on my role, I'll only be able to see the information I should here, but also from a planning perspective. And so here I'm logged in as Teresa, who is the finance manager, who's going to kind of kick off the overall plan. What you'll see is I have the ability to come in, and it's just one of the worklets that I have as I'm getting ready to start my planning process. Now, as I do that, what it's going to do is take me directly to where I need to go from a planning perspective. So it's going to log me in. It's going to land me in my dashboard where I want to kind of see overall how everything's kind of coming together and how everything looks. Now, just to kind of call out a few different things for the folks that maybe haven't seen this. The first is we have the ability to have as many different versions as we want. Now, as you can imagine, when we're talking about all of this different types of planning, all these different cycles that you go through, being able to have as many different versions while being secure and being able to compare all those versions is a huge advantage to what a lot of organizations are doing in this example. One other thing to call out, given the kind of environment that we've had, we've also done a March replan. So we could start to look at a few different versions as we go through. We have our actuals coming in from our source systems. We then have our revised budget that happened in March, and then we're planning for our next budget for the rest of the year. Next to that, that's important is this idea of hierarchy. Again, based on my security from a financial perspective, I don't see my supervisory org on the HR side. All I see is my company hierarchy in the different parts of the organization that I'm allowed to see. Okay. Now, to kick this off, I can start to see overall, how everything is tracking to date. So the first thing, I could see my overall revenue plan for the year based on my March replan. I can also see how we've been performing against actuals against that plan, both from a revenue perspective and an operating expense perspective, kind of month over month. Now, the nice thing here is this can all be completely customized. How I want to view this data, what metrics and KPIs are important to me. We can set this up any way that makes sense for those parts of the organization. I can also quickly see kind of a scorecard, how I'm performing throughout the year. And one thing that I can quickly see is we're actually performing better from a revenue perspective than was originally planned, right? So we're getting these actuals coming in. We're doing a little bit better than our March replan. So that means I need to go ahead and up maybe my revenue target for the end of the year. And then I can also see how I'm doing across things like my personnel expenses, my net income, and seeing kind of where those all sit. Now, one of the big developments that's kind of happened over time that we can start to see as we start to look at some of these models is our business has changed quite a bit throughout the year. And one thing that I can start to see here from a modeling perspective is I can see the different types of revenue that I have. So here, digital, physical, and service revenue. And then I can also see how those percentages are broken up kind of throughout the year. And one thing we'll notice is the physical side of our business has kind of gone down throughout the year, throughout the last 6 quarters, while the digital side has gone up. And so as I look at the rest of my year-end plan, I probably need to adjust out what I'm looking at. Because currently what I'm saying is we're going to stay kind of from a physical perspective higher than digital. So 1, I need to start to adjust my product mix that I'm expecting. And 2, I'm going to bump up my overall revenue plan for the year. Now, as I start to do this, what you'll notice is I have the ability to land the models directly in the context of these analytics. So I can start to plan right here as I'm looking at some of these analytics. The other thing I can do is investigate any of this information before maybe I set my target. One of the first things I might want to do is, as I'm starting to look at this breakdown from my actuals between digital and physical, maybe I want to start to get a little bit more information. So any of this data, I can start to drill in and see what this looks like. So first off, as I start to drill into my digital, I can see the different parts of my organization. Here, Global Modern Services is my highest. Maybe I want to look at which departments within those is going on. And so in this example, field sales is $14 million. One of the key benefits of having this all on one platform is maybe I want to get a little more information like what customers are buying those. I always have the ability to drill in within the system get a full picture of the value, where this is coming from, and then ultimately even be able to drill back to Workday where I might want to do some investigation of that data. And this is just to kind of give you an idea of, again, based on my security, based on what I'm able to see, I can drill in, get some more information, pivot that data any way that I might want to. Here I can see kind of that information. Maybe I want to start to, view this in this example by customer, right? So I have all the different types of ways that I can view this data. I can start to get some more information along that and start to investigate there. And the whole key here is just being able to take a look at that data at a very detailed level, because again, I'm completely connected to that source system as well. So instead of having to go tap on someone's shoulder and get that information, it's all here at my fingertips. Okay, now ultimately, I want to make an adjustment for this. And so I've got my current target that's been set, and now I want to, say, bring this up to a certain level. So in this example, I'm going to come in and input a data point, and then also I want to change kind of the mix of my products. So I think this is actually going to end up more like 58-42%. Now all I have to do is save, and that flows throughout the entire system. And so I'll immediately be able to see that in this example, right, my top down versus my bottoms up is much different, right? So I've got a $45 million gap or so that I need to make up. Now, to do that, this is when I'm going to pass it over to my counterpart in sales to take a look at his sales plan, make some adjustments for that. Now, you'll notice as I kind of tab over here into sales, the way that I look at this and the KPIs and metrics are very specific to me in this example. So while from a finance perspective, I cared about what my GL accounts were doing, operating expenses and different things. From a sales perspective, I really care about, okay, what target am I expected to hit? How is that looking from a bottoms up perspective? And how is my sales head count going to achieve that? One thing to point out that I meant to point out a second ago is this kind of federated planning that Matt was talking about. So you can see here where I've got different parts of the organization planning at different levels. I was just in financial planning, now I'm in sales planning, and based on my security, again, I would only get to see which parts of these matter. And then ultimately, I'm gonna pass it over to HR for their planning as well. Now, the nice thing about having those separate is I can have this very specific to me, right? I might wanna look at this from a territory perspective, not necessarily a cost center perspective. Again, the metrics are really important to have tailored to that individual. Now, as I can kind of quickly see, I see my bookings target of 22.4 that was handed down for me from finance. I can see what my bottoms up current plan is based on the sales headcount that I have, and I can see the variance. We also have this ability to have some geo-based analysis here as well if we wanted to drill in and get some more information kind of geographically. Now, one of the things that I've noticed just based on kind of the time in this year, right, we've been very focused on hiring specific sales headcount in particular offices to the point where we're expecting a certain amount of sales out of these different offices, and we could see where we have a gap where we might want to hire. Now, the interesting thing about this here is given that we can't be on site for the most part, and we're not traveling to different places, remote is a much more optimum way to be able to hire some of our sales heads. And so in this aspect, we have a lot higher of a pool of candidates to pull from. And while we've struggled a little bit to hire in some of these specific cities, we're going to open it up a bit. And so in this example, I'm going to make up that gap by planning to hire a bunch of remote sales heads here. And again, as I save and make a change, I'll be able to see how that kind of flows through ultimately to this point where I can see, okay, now I'm getting pretty close, right? I might want to make an adjustment a little bit higher, but this gets me ultimately pretty close to where I need to be. The other thing to kind of highlight based on kind of that overall data points is in this example where I'm looking at the positions that are being filled for me, from a sales perspective, I can see kind of what that current plan looks like by position, where I have some gaps of about 45 heads, where those positions are in parts of the organization, and ultimately what the current hiring plan looks like. Now, this is managed by HR, and what I can see here is obviously I've got a pretty big gap ultimately of what needs to be hired. So I'm going to pass it over to my HR counterpart to build up the hiring plan for this. But as I do that, and here I log in as an HR representative, where I'm the business partner for sales, now I can see ultimately kind of how everything is coming together. And first thing I notice is, the headcount that we're supposed to have is about 45 lower than it should be from a bottoms up perspective. And I could start to see by office where that gap lies, right? In this example, it lies on the remote side, right? And so I could just try to start to keep everything straight. Below, I've got my to be hired plan, where I'm hiring for particular parts of the organization, for particular positions across different things like sales office and the sort. Now, in this example, this is where I might want to come in and add some new hires from a remote perspective, right? So I can come in and click a button. I can come in and add these together. Here, I'm just copying and pasting to save a little bit of time. And the idea being, I can start to plan these very, very specifically. What office, what market segment am I hiring for, what type of position, what type of start date. And then one of the things to highlight here is this idea of position ID. So as I come in and save, we can see that we've kind of started to seed this data where we're planning ultimately for those extra 45 heads. I could see that I've satisfied that. But one of the interesting things here, and one of the big developments that we've had over the last release or so, is this ability to execute on our plan. And so we're going to show this. I'm going to show this in a little bit, where I ship the finance plan back to Workday. But one of the really important features that has came out is the ability to plan from a planning perspective these new hires, and then execute on this plan. So I can ship these hires over to Workday. They can then go through a business, go through the business process framework, get approved, and ultimately get some positions IDs slided for these actual positions. And then the nice thing is this goes completely full circle, because then this can feed back to the planning system. Now, for any of those folks that have done this, for most organizations, this is a very manual process, right? This whole headcount reconciliation. I'm planning for some new hires. I have to go through a bunch of processes in my execution systems to make that happen. And then ultimately, I need that data fed back from a planning perspective so I know where we sit. We're the only system to be able to do this full round trip execution all in one application. So I can ship this data over, create those position IDs through business process framework, and then ship that data back and see how we're performing against that. So that's a really important features that have came out. Now, to highlight a couple of the other things that I can do from a HR perspective, I'm going to talk about a few of these different items. And so one of the big challenges is kind of this supply versus demand across the entire organization. So as I've started to adjust my headcount plan and my revenue plan from a physical to a digital aspect, we know that this is a ripple effect across the organization, right? So it's not just my sales heads that I need to hire that are specialists in digital, but it's also things like customer service, consulting, my call centers across the organization. And I can quickly see where this starts to make adjustments and where I need to start taking some action. So what I can see is kind of my supply versus deficit across the different types of these employees I have. I have a huge surplus on the physical side, but a big surplus, negative on the digital side. So again, I might want to start to refine this, start to adjust. How am I going to get these folks trained up and hired to support this new kind of digital business that we're doing? And then I can even look at this, a level deeper across things like, what type of different consultants and services folks do I need based on this? What type of customer service folks do I need? Again, just getting a level of detail below. Now, there's a few different ways that we can kind of do this, right? We can buy, build, or borrow, right? So we can develop some of these folks that are on the physical side, switching them from physical to digital. We have the ability to recruit and hire. And then we can also borrow some of these folks from different parts of the organization. And so just to look at this a little bit from a skills development perspective, I might look at what is my current skills supply across the organization, across these folks, and then how many of these folks actually have digital certification. And the first thing I could see is a lot of my physical product folks actually have digital certifications. So those might be the first folks that I move over. And then ultimately, I can start to plan how I'm going to bring those folks up to speed. Now, as I start to develop some of these other individuals to come across the product lines, there's going to be a cost associated with that as well. So I might want to plan for that as I go through. Next is the recruitment and hiring for the folks that, I do have a big gap in. So I still have a pretty big gap that I need to make up of around 600 heads based on that. And then I might want to start to look at, okay, what is my current hiring plan across these different parts of the organization? And then ultimately, when can I get these folks kind of in and recruit and hire some of these different types of consultants, customer service, and call center folks all the way around. Now for time, I'm going to kind of wrap this kind of idea up, but I think the key here is being able to have this data, flowing from my execution system of Workday, and then coming to where I can actually plan this, across things like skills, looking at across my different parts of my different roles and my different folks that I have in-house, that I could start to look at this across those different job profiles. What's my demand versus supply? How many am I going to develop versus recruit versus redeploy? And then ultimately, what's the overall cost of that's going to happen kind of throughout this year? And is it justified? So again, just to kind of give you an idea of bringing this all together, not only am I going to focus on hiring for my sales folks, but again, this could have a bigger ripple effect across the organization that I want to make sure I have a close eye on. Now, after finishing this up, I'm going to pass it back over to my finance folks, where we can start to see how this entire plan kind of comes together. Right? So based on my new budget, where I've made some adjustments on the sales side, I've made some adjustments on the HR side, I can start to see, what my current revenue plan is for the year, what things like my net income is going to be, my revenue across months, down to some of my key metrics and KPIs across the quarters, right? I know my personnel expenses are going to start to go up as I go through this. What type of other things is going to hit, and how does this all kind of come together? I can start to investigate, get some more information, and pull this all together. Now, if I feel pretty good about this, which I do, the next thing that I might want to do is come in and actually publish this back for execution to Workday. Now, I've got my kind of finance plan seeded from all those different parts of the organization. I've brought that all together. Now that I've got my financials kind of done, I actually want to publish this back. Now, the nice thing here is, as I kind of go through this process, it's as easy as defining, okay, when do I want to do this? And in this example, I can come in and decide what I'm planning or what I'm going to publish back. In this example, I'm going to publish my financial plan from a particular version on the planning side to a particular version on the Workday side. And the idea here is, I've got these different budgets sitting over on my execution system from a FINS perspective. I'm going to then push this data back. Now, this is going to go through a process where it's going to take that data and then ship it back from an execution perspective. One of the keys here also is not only from a financial perspective, but from a headcount perspective as well. We talked a little bit about this when I was kind of in the HR persona, but the idea being I have the ability to take that data, plan those positions, ship that back to Workday. It'll kick off some business processes and approval flows to ultimately create position IDs and kick off processes there to then ship that data back from a planning perspective, automatically doing that headcount reconciliation so I can see how we're actually hiring against those kind of over time. Now, as I make those adjustments and changes, I can see, okay, that was successful. All I have to do is click. And again, that's going to take me back over to Workday. Again, based on my security, things that I've been able to see, I can see, okay, I've imported my budget to this revised financial budget. I can click and look at this, ultimately how this kind of comes across. Now, as I make one of these adjustments and changes, what I can see is, okay, here's my overall, how this came across to my GL lines, right? And then I could start to even get some more information. Okay, salary and wages is a certain amount. Maybe I want to start to see this by cost center or by some other kind of aspect of it. Maybe I even want to look at this, from a graphical perspective here as well. And again, the key is having these systems talk together is a huge, huge advantage that we have that no other system out there kind of has. So being able to be in lockstep from a planning and execution perspective allows that all those people that are executing across in the Fin system to be able to see, okay, here's the budgets that have been set. Now we can start to look at actuals versus budgets on the Fin side, as well as plan the future out from a planning perspective. Now, I know I went through that pretty quick, but what I want to highlight is the ability to give different parts of the organization their own unique environments to be able to plan the way they need to plan. And to do that, what we did was come in from a finance perspective, where I'm looking at how everything kind of looks together, ultimately kicking off targets, passing it over to sales, where they had their own individual view and metrics that they cared about to plan their sales headcount and revenue, ultimately passing it back over to HR for some workforce planning. Here we did some simple stuff, but obviously you can do a lot of really interesting things around skills planning, around how are we, taking our current employees and how are we developing them into the future, and then ultimately passing it back to finance to where I've executed on that plan, shipped it back to Workday. Hopefully that gave you a little bit of an idea of how this can all work together based on what Matt and Patty were kind of talking about and pulling together. All right, I'll stop sharing and pass it back over
to me. Thank you, Cody. That was great. All right. All right, so I would like to say a few words about Workday's commitment to the power of one. Workday Adaptive Planning has the same DNA as Workday's technology and is now an integral part of Workday's vision of plan, execute, and analyze all in one system. You got a great preview of what that looks like from Cody's demo. There's one experience, one unified look and feel, one source for data, one security model, and one community. And we really aim to innovate faster while continuing to meet the highest security standards and delivering an unmatched customer experience. And we can work with you to map out how you would implement Workday Adaptive Planning to meet your priorities. We have some customers that are choosing to implement adaptive planning first because the implementation and the time to value is a lot shorter. And we have actually been a leader longer than the last 4 years. This year makes it 5. In 2016, when it was called the Magic Quadrant for Strategic Corporate Performance Management Solutions, it included on-premise and cloud vendors. And we were actually the first cloud vendor to be recognized as a leader back then. So that's really exciting for us. And I want to talk a little bit about kind of your journey to getting you to business agility. We really want to go along with you to achieve this. We want to be a strategic partner for you in this. We will work with customers to define their key business needs and deliver the value in the time span that works for you, and then provide any additional functionality in the subsequent implementation phases. And a lot of our customers have actually seen payback on their investment within 1 year. And we have enabled our team to support remote and virtual delivery across the board. And it's a process that we've adopted for many years now, actually. We've also provided additional enablement and best practices to all of our consultants and engagement managers on how to support the virtual deployment approach. But the initial deployment is just a start. We will work with you along the entire journey. And as we've seen in the last year, priorities change, circumstances change, and we'll be with you through that as well. And in fact, many of our customers are changing their priorities still today. So with that, I would like to answer some questions along with Matt and Cody. We had some come here through the chat. So I will go ahead and pull some up here. Okay, so here's a question about integrating with non-Workday data. So does adaptive planning integrate with non-Workday data?
Yeah, I'll take that one. So absolutely. So across our 5,300 customers, we've seen hundreds and hundreds of different types of systems to pull data from. And even from a planning perspective for even Workday folks, you can imagine you've got other systems out there, things like CRMs like Salesforce or a data warehouse that you might have some other data. So it's super common for us to connect to, obviously, Workday. We have an amazingly strong connection to be able to ship that data back and forth, but also any of those other sources that you have, absolutely possible.
Okay, great. Thank you.
If I could just add to Cody's point, oftentimes the integration is as input into planning. That's kind of the use case we're all familiar with, where we have actuals coming in, and then we develop the plan, kind of a looking forward plan around those actuals. But we're seeing more and more use cases where we also need to publish our results to downstream systems. Cody showed a little bit of that in the kind of super duper integration that we have with Workday transaction systems and execution systems. But there are lots of other use cases where we end up publishing the results of planning to downstream systems. For example, some of our use cases around sales involve taking new account assignments, for example, accounts as in customer accounts in this case, and then publishing them to the CRM system for execution. So it's a bidirectional kind of integration that that we're capable of doing, and that's just a very run-of-the-mill kind of exercise for us as planning.
And to piggyback, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Yeah, maybe one other point I think that's important is that the integration is actually part of the platform. So this is unique to our system. Most systems you have to use like a Dell Boomi or Informatica or a third-party system. This is all part of the platform and meant to be kind of owned and maintained by the users of the system. So again, it's just a key differentiator that most systems either have to use a really heavy IT-laden integration process, or you're stuck to flat files. Within the platform that we just showed you, you have the ability to do that and maintain it yourself. So, sorry, Patty.
Oh, no problem. Do you recommend, another question here, do you recommend implementing financial planning before implementing one of the other use cases like workforce planning or sales planning?
Sure. So let me start, and Cody, you can jump in. It really depends on priorities. So many of our customers may start in HR if they've already implemented HCM and they're ready to move on to the next step of planning people. And so in that case, they would implement planning in the HR context first. And similarly, lots of our customers will extend their financials execution system with planning first before moving on to other use cases. So it's really up to you and where your priorities lie from a platform perspective. Hopefully you got a sense of the flexibility that's possible with what Cody showed. So the platform is able to go in either direction. So it just depends on your priorities and how you guys are thinking about your technology roadmap.
Yeah, totally agree, Matt. I think it's all where your priorities are and where the biggest pain is across the organization. For some folks, it is on the operational side. They've got really heavy Excel models that is a really big burden, and that's where you might start. But to Matt's point, it's really kind of a journey across, and the nice thing is, you can add to this over time, and it's not this massive lift, right? So it's not like you create one use case and then you're stuck, and that's all you can kind of do, and you can't adjust it unless you pay, a massive amount of money. The nice thing is most of our organizations will adjust and add use cases over time, which is why we've seen so much of this kind of throughout the journey.
Great, thank you. And Matt, let's start with you for this next question. When do you use Workday Prism Analytics versus Workday Adaptive Planning?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So Prism, for folks who maybe aren't familiar with it, is our big data management platform and also a dashboarding environment for driving all kinds of analytics and increasingly reporting as well. So for adaptive, if it's an isolated use case that you're bolting onto, a fairly small number of execution systems, you can do that. You can do that all in adaptive. If you need to do a lot of blending of different kinds of data, not just financial and perhaps even HR data, but also bring in large volumes of operational data from external systems. We're working with a gaming company, for example, that has the financial and HR plans that probably look similar to what the folks on the call are used to, but they also have huge amounts of web log information that they like to blend into this so that they could see how different products are performing relative to their high-level financial goals. So those kinds of use cases are great for Prism, which can act as a data hub. So you can stage up all of this data, do a lot of massaging and prep, and then you can feed either raw analytics off of this data, or you can feed planning models from this combined data as well. And so for those of you who are familiar with planning, you generally plan at a higher level, right? You're not going to be planning at the super detailed individual transaction level. And Prism is great for pre-aggregating and getting this kind of data set ready for planning. So again, if the use case is similar to the one I described, Prism is a great platform, a great asset in the Workday toolkit to leverage for this. But if the use case is more self-contained, more lightweight, then you can drive it directly through planning the way Cody described. So we do have in the planning area an integration component that will let you stage up, do some basic staging and prep right in the planning environment, and then drive your models from there. And otherwise, you have this through Prism.
Great, thank you.
One other thing just to add to kind of what Matt said that I think is important too, most organizations, especially if you've got a really heavy operational side or maybe retail transactions or something like that, a lot of really big data, you're going to have a BI solution of some sort. The advantage that we have is, again, being able to log in Workday. If you're using Prism, you're using planning, the security goes across all three. You're not managing this, across another system and trying to manage what data is coming across and, I don't have access to that, I can't pull it. It's all based on your security that is inherited across the platform. So I just wanted to kind of highlight, there's some really interesting use cases and things for them all being connected and being able to plan across that data.
Great, thank you. And I think we'll take one last question. And Cody, I will throw this one over to you. This one is about management reporting and external reporting, and the capabilities around that. So maybe you could talk a little bit about Office Connect and how that works together with planning. Yeah,
happy to. So as we kind of started out this journey, however, lots of years ago, it was kind of finance-led. And one of the biggest issues that you have on the finance side of the house is that not only management reporting, but board reporting, statutory reporting, and some of those different things that you have to do. So we've specifically designed parts of the platform to address that. So you have all kinds of reporting within the platform. So dashboards that I showed you a lot of, ad hoc web reports, that sort of thing. But to Patty's point, we also have something called Office Connect, which is an integration directly to Excel, PowerPoint, and Word. And the idea behind it is being able to take these existing, highly formatted, built-up reports that you have today. So I have an investor pack I have to put together that looks a certain way, or I have a board report that people are used to seeing. Once the system's actually hooked up, we can actually connect to that highly formatted report you already have today and pull that data directly down from adaptive planning. So the benefit there is instead of taking downloads and putting it off in a tab and doing a bunch of work to kind of pull that data together, it's a lot more seamless. And then you have the ability to update that over time, with one click and having that refresh. So it's definitely a customer favorite of ours and hugely valuable from a time perspective across those different types of reporting.
Great, thank you. All right, and with that, I think I will thank you, Cody, and thank you, Matt, for your presentations today. And I will kind of just move on into the final piece here, which is really thanking you all for joining us today and to look at our upcoming sessions that we have. And you can register for these on the widgets in front of you here. I can see that there's one scheduled tomorrow and the next day and the next day. So we actually have a lot coming up here right before our Thanksgiving break. So again, thank you all for joining, and we look forward to seeing you on the next time. Thanks. Bye-bye.